Today, I have James Parker of Parker Productivity here with us. He's going to share a lot with us. I'm sure you've seen the post and the numbers that I've posted of how much my business has grown over the last couple of years. And part of that is my partnership with Parker Productivity, James Parker, my coach. He's literally changed a lot of aspects in my life, including my business and including some personal things. James has helped me cut through a lot of the noise of the outside world and has helped me figure out how to prioritize in the best way possible so that I can be the best mom I can be. So I can be the best girlfriend I could be, the best real estate agent I can be, and the best friend to the people that are in my lives that I care about. So without further ado, here is James Parker of Parker Productivity. How are you, James?
Good. Thank you so much for having me.
You're so welcome. And James, this is your first live ever, right?
Yeah, I believe so. I don't think I've been in the background of any other live, so I think this is the first one.
Okay. All right. Well, welcome to the live world. We have some questions, and I'm really looking forward to getting into this discussion with you because I'm excited to share this with the world. It's changed my life. It's made my life so much better. And it's helped my business grow, which I know it's something that a lot of us entrepreneurs, business owners are looking to do and are looking for a way to grow our business without sacrificing what truly matters, which is our families, our children, our legacies. So tell us a little bit about your story, James. How has the principles of the one thing impacted you personally?
Yeah, no, thank you. I appreciate that. So I was introduced to the one thing in about 2016, and that book just really met me exactly where I was at that moment of time and gave me the clarity I needed to make some just decisions for myself. And that led me into working for a real estate team and just growing down that path of learning and really excelling at what I was doing by taking the tools of the one thing, which led me to being partnered with a bunch of other businesses as well. And really what that did for me is in 2000, probably end of 2017, early 2018, I decided that I actually wanted to start sharing the principles of the one thing with other people. So I put together a let's not call it a good training, but we'll call it a training nonetheless. And it was basically a workshop on how to use some of the tools from the principles of the one thing. And so you and I had known each other for some time, but at that moment you were in that class, that workshop, and that's when you decided to raise your hand and say, hey, can we partner together? And so really you actually were one of the key people in getting my coaching business started, and it's just gone up from right now. I'm a certified one thing coach with Business Maps, and so Parker Productivity is partnered with Business Maps to be able to coach to even more people.
That's amazing. Now, James, you just said you want to, you have actually, through partnering with Business Maps, have the opportunity to share this with even more people. But if you had to sum up a key message from the one thing, what would you say?
Yeah, so great question. Really, the core goal of the one thing that Gary Keller and Jay Papasan were really trying to communicate is that everything doesn't matter equally. Yes. And some viewers and some of the viewers today probably are aware of the 80-20 principle. And Gary Keller basically takes that principle and he creates a variation on that, which he calls extreme Pareto, because it's called the Pareto principle as well. And so a lot of times you might take the 80, you have, let's say you've got 25 things that you're trying to consider what you should be doing. And if you took 20% of that, you're left with 5 things. And Gary Keller says, keep taking 20%, 20%, 20% until you get to one thing. And so taking the 80-20 principle and taking that to an extreme, that's really where the principle, the one thing, came out. And so it might be helpful if I share a little bit about what the 80-20 principle is for those that aren't familiar with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the 80-20 principle is basically the majority of the results that you're looking for actually come from a minority of the activities that you actually do. So most of your outputs actually come from a small number of inputs. And what Gary did is he said, actually, a majority of your outputs come from one input. And so that principle has really been what has guided me these last few years of not only teaching it to others, but actually walking them through what does that look like on a day-to-day, like what does that look like, what does that look like weekly and monthly, so that I can actually either keep more money in my pocket, spend more time with my family, or just have a bigger impact on the world. So I love talking about it. I love teaching it. So it's just a lot of fun. So thanks for letting me share a little bit about that.
Yes. Now, James, you just talked, about possibly making more money, spending more time with family. Who do you think these principles can apply to?
Yeah, so I think really the other component too, I will go back to real quick because this will tie into how it impacts others, is that extreme Pareto principle, or the 80-20 principle. He takes that down to such a helpful tool, and that helpful tool is a question. And in the book, it's called the focusing question, which is, what's the one thing I can do such that by doing it, everything else becomes easier or unnecessary? And so when we're applying that principle to, like, well, who does that apply to? I'm convinced that it applies to everybody. So whether you're a mom, whether you're a student, whether you're a business owner, whether you're a CEO of a Fortune 500 company, it doesn't matter who you are. Really what it is I want to be doing what matters most. And for me to know what matters most, I need to be able to not add more things to my life. I actually need to subtract things to my life till I'm down to what's my most important work that I can be doing right now.
Right. I love that this can apply to everyone, because when I wrote about today's live session, I said, if you run a household, if you run a company, if you're breathing, this can apply to you. And I love that you just mentioned the focusing question, because that focusing question, when everything seems overwhelming, you can focus on that. You can ask yourself that question and start to break it down to focus on what matters most in that moment. And that makes a huge difference. Last question. So, or actually, no, not last question. I have a couple more questions. What's a couple of things, a lot of people talk about principles and, go do this, but what's something that somebody can do and apply today that they can get started on immediately? What are some of the first steps?
Yeah, so I would say two things primarily. Number one is grab a copy of this book. It's transformative, and so if that's the only thing that you take away from this conversation is, hey, I'm gonna invest a few dollars into the rest of my life, that's 100% do that first. The second thing I would say is, and you talked about this, just a moment ago. If you take that focusing question and apply it to the different contexts you're in, it gives you so much clarity. So if you say, like, what's the one thing I can do today as a mom such that by doing it, everything else I'm trying to do in my life is easier or necessary? And you ask those kind of questions, what's the one thing I can do for my business this year such that by doing it, everything else becomes easier and necessary? So read that book and that'll explain the focusing question. But if the only thing you do from this conversation is ask the focusing question every single day, amazing what kind of clarity you can get. And obviously there's layers to that and it's nuanced, but it's a key takeaway.
Perfect. Thank you so much, James, for sharing so much good stuff with us. It literally is life-changing. And when people pick up the book, they'll realize that there are tools within that book. It's not just a book that, you know, gives you a narrative. It's actually a book that gives you tools to start to implement living life by the one thing, by the principles of the one thing. So James, if somebody wants to contact you and wants to sit down with you and have a conversation with you about how you might be able to help them in their life or in their business, how can they get a hold of you? What's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, so the one place to find me is jamesmatthewparker.com, and that'll direct you to a place where you can connect with me.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you so much. And we do have a one thing book giveaway because it's the one action item we gave people today. And so if you want a copy of the one thing, you have to, the first person to comment on this live video and say, send me a copy of the one thing, will get a copy of the one thing book. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, James. And we will see our friends on Instagram in just a little bit. Have a great day, everybody.